The day I realized my neighbor had quietly snatched 8 feet of my backyard, just like gone. I stood there for a long minute, staring at a brand new fence that absolutely did not belong where it was. It wasn't the fence itself that was the problem. I mean, people put up fences all the time. That's just life. But this thing was sitting deep inside my property, and the guy who built it was acting like it had been part of the landscape since the dawn of time. The moment he gave me that dismissive shrug and closed his front door in my face, I decided then and there. If he wanted to play pretend with my land, I was going to use that strip in a way he'd never, ever forget. To get why this got so messy, you have to picture where I live. It's a quiet, unremarkable part of town, one of those spots built back in the late 70s. Nothing fancy, just modest houses, wide streets, and a ton of old trees. The kind of place where you wave at cars passing by even if you don't recognize the driver. I bought my place about 11 years ago, right after a divorce, just looking for a fresh start. It wasn't a mansion, but it had character, white siding, a cute little wooden porch, and the real prize, a backyard that was wider than most on the block. The lot sat on this slight angle, so the back stretched out further than anyone expected. For over a decade, that yard was an open, beautiful expanse. No fences, just grass and a line of old maple trees acting as a natural border, something the previous owner, this sweet guy named Walter, had kept as a rule. He used to laugh and say, "Fences just make people think they're enemies," so we kept it open. For 11 years, it was perfect. The neighborhood kids would chase baseballs through the grass. My dog would run lazy circles in the evenings. And in the fall, those maples turned this brilliant, burning red that made the whole place look like a postcard. It was peace, plain and simple. Then last spring, the house behind mine finally sold. The old owner had passed, and within a month, this young couple moved in, Tyler and Ashley. They were in their late 20s, maybe early 30s, and they were the renovation types. You know the kind, trucks out front at dawn, roofers, landscapers, the whole 9 yards. They put about 20 grand into that place in 2 weeks flat. At first, I was happy for them, thinking they were just excited first-time homeowners. But then, the fencing truck showed up. It was one of those big, professional rigs pulling a trailer stacked with fresh cedar panels. I remember watching the crew unload, sipping my coffee from the kitchen window, not giving it a second thought. But by sunset, when those tall wooden panels went up, something fell off. It was a weird, nagging feeling in the back of my brain. The fence looked way too close to my house. Perspective can be a funny thing, though, so I tried to brush it off until the next morning when curiosity finally got the better of me. I walked out there with a tape measure. I knew that corner maple tree like the back of my hand. The original survey said the distance from my porch corner to that tree was right around 30 feet. I hooked the tape, walked back, and pulled it tight. 22 feet. I measured again. 22 feet. I stood there, the wind rustling the leaves, realizing that 8 feet of my property was now effectively on the other side of their wall. I figured it was a mistake. Construction crews aren't perfect, right? So I went to their front door. Tyler answered, tall, athletic, looking like he'd just finished a marathon. I kept my tone light and friendly. "Hey man, I think there's a little issue with that new fence. It looks like it's a few feet inside my property line." He didn't look worried, didn't look curious, just leaned against the door frame like I was a telemarketer. "Our contractor followed the survey stakes," he said. I asked if he had a copy of the survey, and he just shrugged. The guys know what they're doing. I glanced past him, hearing Ashley moving around inside, and suggested he double-check before they finished. He crossed his arms. "The job's already paid for," he said with another quick, careless shrug. "And honestly, the fence looks great where it is." That was the moment the temperature in the room dropped. He wasn't aggressive, just dismissive, like my property rights were a minor inconvenience he didn't have time for. I nodded, said, "All right, I'll look into it," and he gave a quick, thin smile before closing the door. 2 days later, I had a pro out there, Carl, a guy with a gray beard, a sunburned neck, and a truck that looked like it had been surveying land since the 70s. He didn't say much, just got to work. About 3 hours later, he wiped his hands on a rag and looked at me. "You were right," he said. "Not even close." He pulled out a bundle of bright orange flags and started lining them up. When he was done, There was a perfect screaming orange line running 8 feet deep into Tyler and Ashley's new backyard. I took a dozen photos, got the official docs, and emailed everything to Tyler. 3 days later, nothing. A week later, silence. When I finally caught them, Tyler acted like I was bothering him over a missing pen. Look, moving is going to cost a lot of money, he said like that was my problem. Then he hit me with the kicker. You still have plenty of yard. I was stunned. He actually thought he could just shrug away my land. He closed the door again, and that was that. For the rest of the day, I was furious. Not the screaming kind, but that cold, simmering rage that sits in your chest and starts spinning up plans. I went back to the county records, confirmed the parcel maps, and saw that the land was still legally mine. And the local ordinances? They were very clear about what a homeowner could build on their own property. That's when the idea hit me. It was poetic. It was hilarious. It was perfectly legally mean. I called up a guy named Miguel, a local landscaper who loved a good project. We stood at the property line, looking at those orange flags, and then at the fence, and he just whistled. What are you thinking? He asked. I looked him dead in the eye. Planter boxes, 4 feet tall, running the entire length of the line. He smiled slowly. And what are we planting? I stared at that fence. Bamboo. Miguel burst out laughing. Oh man, that's evil. The following Monday, the scene was set. Miguel's crew arrived with an excavator, and right on cue, Tyler and Ashley walked out onto their deck. You could see the confusion turn to shock as the crew started digging, not on my side, but right inside their fence on the strip that was technically mine. Tyler marched out, looking ready to argue. What's going on? He barked. Miguel just looked up and said, You'll have to ask the property owner. Tyler turned to me, his face turning a shade of red. You can't just build stuff in my yard, he snapped. I didn't yell. I just pointed to the orange flags. It's not your yard. For 2 days, they watched. They watched the steel posts go in. They watched the concrete pour. They watched as we built a 12-foot-long, 4-foot-high cedar wall right in their faces. And then came the bamboo. It started as thin, green stalks, but bamboo is the ultimate spike plant. It grows fast. Within a few weeks, it was 7 feet tall. By August, it was an 8-foot-tall, impenetrable green fortress. The impact was immediate. The sunlight that used to hit their patio disappeared. That expensive, perfect landscaping they'd put in, dead in the shade. The view they'd stolen from me? Now, they were looking at a wall of leaves. You could hear the frustration in their voices every evening. That low, tired, this is insane muttering that drifted over the wall. They'd realized they'd made a massive mistake, but they were too stubborn to admit it yet. Then, about a month later, Tyler knocked on my door. He looked tired. Can we talk? He asked. We stepped out onto the porch. He looked at the bamboo like it was a monster under his bed. That stuff you planted, it's ruining the yard. The deck gets no light, and our plants are dying. I leaned against the railing, keeping it casual. That sounds frustrating. He looked at me, probably trying to see if I was mocking him. Would you consider taking the planters out? I let the silence hang there, just long enough to make him sweat. Maybe, I said, if the fence moves. He stared at me, then looked back at the bamboo, then at the cost of moving that entire structure. He finally just nodded. 2 weeks later, the fence company was back. I sat on my porch, coffee in hand, watching them tear that fence down, panel by panel, post by post. It was the most satisfying thing I'd ever seen. They moved it back, exactly to where those orange flags had been. The next day, Miguel took the bamboo away. Just like that, the light returned to their deck, the shadows vanished, and I got my 8 feet back. Tyler and I still live next door. We wave sometimes, but we're definitely not friends. Every time I mow the lawn, I look at that fence, perfectly straight, exactly where it belongs, and I have to chuckle. It makes me wonder, though, was I being petty, or was I just reclaiming what was mine? Some people say you should always take the high road, but sometimes the high road doesn't get your land back. What about you? If you were in my shoes, would you have done the same thing, or would you have handled it differently? Share your take in the comments. I'm dying to hear who's on which side of this fence.